So let's just start this with a simple but potentially mind-numbing question. Why do you want to be more productive? And when I'm asking that question, don't hear like judgment in there. I want you to look inward with compassion. For me, that's really hard. So as I ask myself this question, I just want to ask myself, okay, why do I want to be more productive? And I want you to just sit with that for a minute. I'm going to sit with it for a minute for me too. I just want you to keep nudging yourself further down that little path of whys until you get to something that you know is the real reason. So for me, as I've been doing this, I ask myself, why do I want to be more productive? And the answer that comes back is so that I can do more things. And okay, so then I ask myself, why do I want to do more things? You know, when you get the answer, say like, okay, well, why is that? And why I want to do more things is because I think that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do all the things. Keep your house a certain way, eat certain food, cook it yourself, work a certain number of hours, which is usually in my mind more than the required minimum. And you're supposed to be able to do all of that and have all these other great things going on with your friends and with your spouse and with, just life in general. So, I feel like that's what you're supposed to do to be a functioning member of society, to be a good person. So, why do I think that that's why I have to be a good person? I don't really know the answer to that part yet. But we're starting to get somewhere, right? As you work through that, you start to go, okay, I thought that my obsession with getting more things done, with managing my time and organizing it perfectly, was because I thought it was because I just get a dopamine rush from checking something off a list. And I do get a dopamine rush from checking things off lists. I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but I do. But why do I get that dopamine rush? It's because in my mind, that equates with I'm one step closer to being a good person, which means that if I don't get those things done, and here's the disastrous part, if I don't get those things done, I think I'm a bad person. And that's just not always how life works. I mean, there are things that if you don't do them, you can probably say like, yeah, that might make you a bad person, right? If you have the skills to save someone and you say that you're not going to, and there's no real compelling reason that you're not going to, maybe you could say like, oh, lack of action would make, a surgeon that refuses to perform life-giving surgery because the patient can't pay, like that might make them a bad person, right? But that's not what's going on here. I'm not a surgeon. I'm not putting anyone in danger when I, don't do the laundry, when I leave the laundry in the dryer, which my laundry is in the dryer right now, has been for a couple of days, because I keep forgetting about it. And that's even uncomfortable for me to admit. That is not something that I am proud of. But the fact that I have my dryer and it's like the second or third day that it has clothes in it that are not going to need to be fluffed, that doesn't make me a bad person. But I have been running my whole life thinking that it did. So that's interesting. That's part of why I'm obsessed with being productive. Some other reasons, and you're probably going to have your own, so don't feel like confused or upset if I don't name yours here. But some other reasons that I've uncovered when I've asked myself this question or thought about situations in the past, I've wanted to be more productive because I thought that that would give me approval. I've been obsessed with productivity because I wanted to make more money, which meant that I wanted to provide stability for my family, which again comes back to being a good person, just in a different way. I have been obsessed with productivity because I'm scared. Because I'm scared I'm going to lose my job, or that if I don't do certain things and I don't get them done, people will think less of me, or they won't love me, or I won't be safe. And again, I'm sure everybody can think of an example where those things might be true, but for the majority of things that I come across in my life, it's not true. If I don't get dinner cooked on time, that doesn't mean everyone who loves me is going to stop loving me, or that I'm going to make more or less money, or things like that. If I am late on a project at work because it took more effort than anyone was anticipating and I kept everybody updated, I'm probably not going to lose my job. I mean, maybe I would if I worked for a bad boss. But if you work for reasonable people who understand that you have limitations, and that sometimes things just don't go as planned and can be a little bit flexible, you're not in real danger, right? Yeah, so if you're like a chronic chaser of productivity and you haven't really ever stopped to ask yourself this question, I think it's time. You need to ask yourself why. So another reason that I hadn't thought of, because I want to bring in other perspectives, so, be sure that you tell me what answers you come up with for you. But in his book, 4,000 Weeks, which I'm going to review in another video, spoiler alert, I loved it, but Oliver Burkeman talks about how we essentially use productivity as a way to fool ourselves into thinking that life isn't too short. The reality is that we all only have so much time to be alive, to be on Earth. And productivity, it offers this really shiny, beautiful hope that we can actually get more done in the limited time that we have, that we can have more of an impact. But oftentimes what happens, and I'm not really quoting him here, just to be clear, that was his idea and I want to give him credit. But oftentimes what happens when we are trying to just cram in as much as possible because we want to experience our life to the fullest, or we want to have the biggest impact, or whatever it is that we end up chasing a lot of things that aren't actually worthwhile. So if that's part of your answer and you get to that, I think it's also really important to start asking yourself the question of like, what things am I doing that are really worthwhile? If something doesn't make the list, maybe asking yourself, why? Again, it always comes back to why. This concept of using productivity as a way to avoid our own mortality. It reminds me of a story in the Bible. And this is not, I'm just gonna apologize to both groups of people who I think probably just heard me say that. The people who are like, oh yes, a Bible illustration. I'm not gonna actually be quoting from the Bible. I love the Bible, I respect the Bible, but my illustration here, like, it's not a sermon, so if I get some facts incorrect, feel free to correct me in the comments, but this is mostly just for illustration purposes. And then anyone who heard like, oh, there's an illustration in the Bible and isn't like super thrilled about it, I promise, again, this is not going to be a sermon. I am not going to get super preachy. I just really like this story. When the story of the Tower of Babel takes place, the world has just been destroyed by a flood. So if you can imagine just probably like the worst natural disaster you've ever seen, and you're thinking like, wow, okay, you go in and you have to rebuild after something like that. And you didn't know what it was like before. but you have to rebuild in a world that has been destroyed by something like that. And they settle, they start building cities, and as humans do, they start to have visions, they start to have dreams. And they say, we are going to build a tower up to the sky, up to the top of the sky. And so they start building this tower. And I am picturing myself as a builder on this tower. And I am thinking that, it's not every generation that comes after a worldwide flood. I think they probably knew how momentous it was that they were able to build this tower. I think that, who they were and probably a little bit of their ego was bound up in this. I know it would be for me in getting this tower built, a tower that's going to reach the sky. And, we will be known for this work that we've done, and we will be remembered for it. It's not just notoriety now, it is notoriety for centuries, right? It's a legacy. And God looks down in the story and he sees what they are doing with their hands. They are building something. First of all, they're building something that is purely for their own selves, which is not the point of this video, but like that is a lot of times what you'll hear is people say like, oh yeah, God looked down and was like, it's not good for them to be so full of themselves and prideful. That's going to get them into trouble. We're going to stop this. But I also think like God being God looks down and he sees that they're building a tower that they can never complete. Yeah, they're doing it for the wrong reasons, probably. But like you can't reach the sky. And if you're God, you know that. You know that it's just gases and optical illusions and light reflecting and refracting in this dance. And so in his kindness, he says, I'm not going to let them build and 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 build until the point that they can't breathe. Because that's what would have happened if they tried to reach the sky. And so, as somebody who is like, communications is like my major, that's been my profession. Someone who's a communication major, I love what happened next because, he doesn't, use a natural disaster. He doesn't, appoint somebody who stops it. What does he do? He confuses their language. And so that's the story of how we have different language groups. And it stops the work. Because it's not good for us as humans. And I think that even ancient cultures understood this. It's not good for us to build something that isn't worthwhile, that isn't going to last. It's not good for us to put our value in something that we do with our hands or with our time, right? Because I think that, in ancient culture, whatever you were doing with your time, you were probably doing it with your hands. You were, making cloth. You were farming. We still do a lot of things with our hands now, but a lot of the things that we used to do with our hands, like to make a living, to find food, all of those things, we now do a lot with our mind. And so time becomes this new thing in which we place our value. We place our value in how much we're able to do with our time without ever stopping to ask, is this even worthwhile? Why am I doing this? So I'd encourage you, if you haven't been convinced by this video, I would encourage you to go ahead and just spend a few minutes today asking yourself, why do I want to be more productive? And be really honest. Write down your answers. If you want to, reach out to me or leave them in the comments, I would love to hear them. I think that's enough for today. We can go from there.